Is this how the world ends? With a bang or a whimper? That's the very question people have been asking for millennia. People have called it Armageddon, the apocalypse, end of days, end of time. Over the next few minutes, we're going to take all these current events and we're going to piece them together. Enjoy. Over the last few decades, we have seen our world be thrust into chaos. From everything from the militarization of our police forces to the mass migration of people throughout the world. A media going absolutely crazy. Impeachments. Climate change. The division within our nation. Wars. Horrific wars over natural resources. Trillions and trillions of dollars mysteriously vanishing. The hardening of our power grid, cover-ups, 5G. So let's break all this down and let's connect the pieces. But before we go into that, let's try to figure out the main reason for all this global chaos. Now there's been a lot of speculation and a lot of theories as to what's really happening in the world. They range from anywhere between asteroids, volcanoes, global-wide pandemics, earthquakes, nuclear war, climate change. Global pandemics. On September 3rd, 2019, our government announced that they were going to spend $2.8 billion on a whole bunch of smallpox vaccines. It's kind of crazy since smallpox is supposed to have been eradicated for 40 years. But what could a global pandemic actually do? In today's society, if a global pandemic was really to start, it would first start in an uncivilized or a less civilized civilization. The chance of it starting in Chicago, New York, or Europe are pretty slim. We have so many government agencies and so much technology now that can detect and quarantine any area. But could a global pandemic really end the world and life as we know it? Absolutely it could. But the chances of a worldwide pandemic from really wiping out all of mankind are pretty slim. Now I'm not saying it can't happen. The reason they're buying $2.8 billion worth of smallpox vaccines is very, very questionable. Now let's discuss nuclear war. Nuclear war now is always a constant threat. We fear it. They're always telling us that Russia's going to bomb us, or whatever the case may be. But you still got to take into account the human element behind that. Would these people really jeopardize ending life on Earth with a nuclear war? I believe they called it mutual assured annihilation or destruction. That means once one country launches a nuclear weapon, then they all going to launch. And that means pretty much life on everything on this planet is gone. But I really have to believe in my heart that these people ain't stupid enough to do something like that. They don't want to die. They don't want their families to die. People, I believe, are inherently good. But is that a real threat? Absolutely, and it's terrifying. It really is terrifying. Our government has a lot of hardened facilities, nuclear bunkers. They're always talking about it in the media. Every country has to parade and show their might. But I really don't think that we have to worry about a nuclear annihilation. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But that brings me to my next topic. What about volcanoes? Volcanoes are terrifying. We all know about Yellowstone. I think they said we're overdue for a Yellowstone eruption. Now, if there was a volcanic eruption, say in Yellowstone, that would be horrific for the United States economy. That would be devastating for the people in the surrounding areas, hundreds of miles, maybe even 1,000. It could cause a nationwide economic collapse. Pandemics can start. More localized pandemics would start in such an area if a major if a major eruption was to happen. But for the whole world to be concerned just about one volcano, it's not likely. Basically, Europe isn't going to be all that much concerned about, a massive supervolcano erupting here, even though it would have economic effects to them too. But the devastation is going to be more to the United States. So is that a possibility? Oh, absolutely. Now, if we had volcanoes erupting all around the planet, that would be absolutely horrific. But it doesn't answer the question as to why our government is doing what they're doing now, and all the preparations they're making in all the countless wars in the Middle East and all around the world. So, is a massive volcano eruption, could that end life? Probably not. It would be devastating for us, or be devastating for whatever country it happened in. But I don't necessarily believe it's something we really have to worry about. So that brings me to my next point. What about massive earthquakes? Now this is a real threat. So a lot of you may have heard of the Cascadia subduction zone or the San Andreas fault. Now we have fault lines all around the planet. And so there's earthquakes that's going to happen all around the planet. I believe it was in 2013. We had a massive earthquake over there by Japan, which created a tsunami, which killed about 10,000 people. And we felt the effects all the way over here in the United States, right along the California border. Now, as devastating as that may sound, even if it was a 10.0, that would still only be devastating to that country or that region of the country. That could be the reason why we have massive military exercises and movements. Over the last couple of years, there's been massive amounts of military equipment being brought into these areas. And that always begs the question is why? Do you know something? But the thing about earthquakes and volcanoes is they cannot be predicted. They can say, yes, we're overdue for one, but you cannot pinpoint a date onto when the next event is going to happen. It's almost impossible. As horrible as it be, because thousands of people are going to die, billions and billions of dollars in damage, it could very well, and it probably most certainly would, cause an economic collapse in our country, and it could be felt around the world. But I'm not 100% sure that that's something we all have to really concern ourselves about, because an earthquake is not going to cause, unless we had a global earthquake, unless something major happened to the planet itself, which is going to cause major tectonic shifts in our Earth's crust, I don't think we have to really worry about earthquakes. So that's going to bring me into my next point. What about an asteroid? Now, an asteroid strike would be the worst possible scenario we could face as humans. I think our government knows it. I think they're really preparing for something like this. And that ties every single thing together. Now let me explain why. If an asteroid was to actually strike the Earth, and now listen, I know this is going to sound like some straight out of Hollywood, but bear with me for a second. Now, if an asteroid was to actually hit Earth, that would be the worst case scenario. That's the worst possible thing that could happen. If it was anything like the one that killed the dinosaurs, which happened to be about 6 miles wide and put off enough energy as 21 billion Hiroshima nuclear bombs, that would be a planet that would be devastating to the entire world. Massive amount of earthquakes would ripple around the globe. Volcanic eruptions would happen everywhere on the planet. We'd have atmospheric disturbances like we've never seen, meaning we wouldn't be able to, long-range communications wouldn't be possible. Massive global-wide pandemics would occur. Wars would ensue. That's the one thing I think our government knows about, and I think they're really trying to prepare for. If you look at all the signs and all the events that's happened, say in the last 10 years, It all points to that. So what are some of the events that are happening around the world today that can tie everything together? Well, let's dive into that. Wars around the world have been ramping up, especially the war on oil. Now, this comes at a time when our government and governments around the world have been expressing concerns about climate change. So why is climate change such a concern when our governments are trying to dominate the world oil market at a time when we have the technology and advancements in alternative energy? And in the event of a massive meteor strike, and the world is thrust into nuclear winters, millions of people dying of exposure, we are going to need all of the natural resources we have that we can get. That is why we are still ramping up these major wars in the Middle East. That's why we are also effectively cutting out Russia and China out of the mix. So we dominate everything. We have $21 trillion missing. $21 trillion. That's a lot of money. Why do they need it? What are they doing with it? Why can't they tell us? That's a major question we deserve an answer to. Now, in the event of atmospheric disturbance, your long-range systems, your 4G towers, your satellite broadcasts are going to be much less effective, if not totally ineffective. So you're going to need to install a system that can broadcast over shorter distances. And that's what 5G is. Instead of having a tower that broadcasts over a 20-mile or so area, 5G, you put a tower on every street corner. That's a much shorter distance to be able to broadcast that signal to the next tower, to the next, and so on. And it's going to be much less affected by atmospheric disturbances. Now, experts have warned that in the event of a massive meteor strike, the amount of energy it would produce would wipe out nations' power grids. Is that why in 2019, earlier this year, the president signed an executive order to effectively harden our power grid against an EMP attack? The same kind of technology that would be needed to harden the grid in case of a meteor strike? Now, over the last several years, we have seen our government assist in the mass migration of people into more civilized areas. Now, is that just to go ahead and change that country's culture, take away their heritage? Or is it a way that if you knew something massive was about to happen in one area, you try to move as many people to another area just to kind of ensure our survival? Now let's talk about the military. Over the last several years, we have seen a massive increase in military exercises from Florida to Washington. We've also seen the transportation of massive amounts of military equipment and vehicles on trucks and trains being strategically placed throughout our nation. We've also seen the militarization of our police. What does that mean? Are they expecting an attack? Are they expecting a major event to happen? Are they strategically placing all these pieces like chess, getting ready in case of a massive event to help control our nationwide chaos if it ensues? What are they doing? Just another piece of the puzzle. Now, the last couple of decades, the government has openly talked about how they have hardened facilities and about the massive amounts of tunnels they have in Missouri, Arkansas, Illinois, throughout the Midwest that are hundreds of miles long, hundreds of miles deep. A lot of these tunnels are used now as storage facilities, storing plants, food, seeds. Outside of these tunnels, they also have massive amounts of empty school buses available. What does that mean? It's kind of scary in itself. We also see the powerful, the rich and elite buying doomsday bunkers. There's a report saying that a lot of your super billionaires are fleeing, buying doomsday, prepping apocalypse style houses in New Zealand, Argentina, Paraguay. That's pretty terrifying too. What do they know? What are they preparing for? But it also makes me wonder if they are, in a way, trying to help us prepare for a massive event. Could that be the reason why we had such the rise of survival shows on television? I don't want to make this sound like it's too conspiratorial, but over the last 10 years, there has been dozen survival shows, and they even went to the lengths of having people appear on national TV naked just to be able to draw you in so you can watch, because they know you're going to pick up some of the techniques and ideas that they're teaching in these television shows, but they're drawing you in with a naked body. Now, those are just a few key points, and I'm going to break all these down in future videos. I'm also going to explain more. But now let's move on to, what is our government going to do about this? Now, over the last few decades, NASA and the government and governments around the world have been trying to come up with ways to knock an asteroid or comet off its path, redirect it. But within the last 10 years, it's been kind of suspicious with the implementation of the DART program, the Double Asteroid Redirection Program, HAMMER, Hypervelocity Asteroid Mitigation Mission for Emergency Response, or Japan's Hayabusa 2 program that actually launched in 2014 and hit a comet in 2019. They said they wanted to discover the origins of the universe, but there was also reports that they said they also wanted to see if they could redeflect that comet. The DART program is set to launch on July 22nd, 2021 and impact on October 2022. This came out in August of 2018. With the creation of Space Force in 2018. So what do they know? What is going on? There's too many signs that says there's something major going to happen. And like I stated before, when I said you cannot predict a volcano or an earthquake, fortunately enough with an asteroid or a comet, that is something you can predict. You can predict it almost down to the day, and you can almost predict exactly where it's going to hit. That's why I say that is the most concerning thing I think we should all have to worry about. But with that also, it gives us time. It gives them time to prepare. Are you getting prepared? The government is. We only begun to scratch the surface. And in future videos, I'm going to break down every single topic and every point that I've made. I'm going to add some as well. But I want you guys to take something away from this too. If nothing else, have fun. Enjoy your life. Embrace your family and your friends. Live out those hopes and dreams and fantasies. Because you never know when it's going to be over. I believe our government has an idea. They're not telling us. So live. It's your life. It's the only one you got.